Affairs Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi has now confirmed that his department is extending the period of public consultation over his proposed new changes to our migration legislation. Motsoaledi is proposing big changes to 3 different pieces of law. They regulate how government deals with citizenship, refugees and migration as a whole. Motsoaledi says the current system is not working. As you know, there are huge concerns about whether Home Affairs can deal with the applications it receives. And, of course, there are claims that there's a large number of people living in South Africa without proper documentation. Professor Loren Landau is a research professor at Wits University and Professor of Migration and Development at Oxford University in the UK. Professor Landau, good day to you and thank you for your time. These are huge changes to our current laws. Let's start at the beginning here. Do we need to change the laws we have in South Africa? Is our current system broken in a way that requires a change?
I think there is absolutely a need for change. We've been looking at an immigration system that has not functioned. It's been corrupt. It's been inefficient. It's not been in supporting South Africa's development or peace and security for many years. The question for me is whether the changes that they are proposing are in line with what South Africa needs or if they're a response to political pressure and populism. And I think it's probably the latter.
In other words, you suggest that this is really about a response to the sort of, some people call it xenophobia that we're seeing from many people and groups and some political parties in South Africa.
Right. If you read the white paper, which is a very, I must say, a very long and poorly written document, it is largely a response to a problem that South Africa doesn't have, which is massive numbers of people coming, causing crime, causing terrorism, causing unemployment, getting citizenship without the proper documentations or qualifications. There's no evidence that any of these things are real problems, but they're very much at the center of contemporary political debate across the political spectrum. So I think this is a way of the ANC and the government as a whole trying to get out ahead of that and to show before the election that they are doing what the South African people want, but perhaps not what the South African people need.
So in your view, then, what do the South African people need that they don't want?
Well, I think what we need to see is a migration policy that, of course, respects the human rights of refugees and others who are coming, who need protection, and South Africa has signed and is committed to those principles. But we also need a migration policy that looks at how do we promote investment, how do we create jobs, how do we create trade and flows throughout the region that not only help South Africa, but will help the region to become stronger, boost the economy, boost stability in the region. And there's almost no mention of any of those things in the white paper.
So, I mean, what kind of measures would do that? And I realize, in a way, South Africa is a lot like many, many other countries. The debates that we're seeing here around foreign nationals, you could, just change the accents and could be in the United States, or in Australia even. What kind of measures do you believe we in Southern Africa should be implementing? I mean, what would grow the economy and make us safer?
Well, I think primarily if we look at what's happening in South Africa, there's small businesses really struggling. We need ways of bringing in products, of promoting trade, of promoting small-scale investment that will help create jobs where we need them. Not at the top end of the socioeconomic spectrum, not for Coca-Cola or BMW. It's great to have their investments as well. But right now, the law that's being proposed is all about those big funders. It's all about the people with a lot of money. There's very little that is about thinking about how migration affects people at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum and how it might help them. And I think easing trade, easing movement around the region, taking a realistic look at what can be gained from labor, from investment, from trade, would make a real difference. And we can have additional regulations. We can have border security, but let's not do that at the cost of these other things that might help the majority of South Africans.
It's interesting because the African Union has been speaking for years about a sort of borderless Africa. There's been this idea of, some have even suggested a sort of single currency, but certainly making it easier for trade, making it easier for goods and people to move around our continent. And the obvious example is in Europe, where they formed the European Union after the Second World War, and that's made Europeans much richer. It's worked. It seems that South Africa, probably more South Africans oppose that than people in any other African country.
Yeah, I mean, Dlamini Zuma was part of the African Union's proposal. She was the one who helped launch that for an African passport and greater integration. But now that she's back and others are back in South Africa, it's something that no political party is going to put their weight behind. And in fact, very few South Africans would, at this point in time, support that kind of movement. And there are issues that there weren't in the EU about inequality of wealth, about security, about governance. Those are real issues. But I think there is a time, and that time is probably now, to discuss, okay, South Africa has taken some knocks, has taken some economic, it's in hardship. How do we get ourselves out of that? And immigration and migration within the country with our neighbors is one way, one of many tools that are at disposal, and those debates are really not happening.
The other issue is around capacity. So what I'm talking about is you can change the law as much as you like. We all know that for a very long time to come it's going to be possible to walk across our border. And we're not alone in this. I mean, there are many countries in the world that you can walk across a border, many countries on our continent as well. So is there any point in changing the law if you can always just walk across our border?
Well, there's a point if you're a politician and you want to get re-elected, because this is a good way of saying that you're doing something and then you wait later and see that the implementation doesn't work. But I think you're absolutely right in saying tighter restrictions, which is what's being proposed, greater kind of regulation is all fine and well if you have a well-functioning state. The U.S. has not been able to stop people coming across its border. The European Union has tried, the UK has tried, at great human cost, a great public cost, and with very little effect. And so to think that South Africa can manage this, has the tools to do a very precise sort of, we're going to let in this number, keep out this many, is not going to happen. What will happen is greater levels of corruption at the border, greater levels of corruption in home affairs offices across the country, more violence, but not probably fewer immigrants.
Professor Landau, I mean, I accept everything you say as fact. You're an expert on the subject, known you for many years. I think many people listening to you will feel very different. They may even agree with you on the facts, but I think what they feel, and I can't speak for anybody except myself, but I think what some people may feel is that they feel that foreign nationals are making their lives in South Africa worse. And America has exactly the same debate. America is a nation, really, of migrants, which has sort of taken over from the original people. And yet, even they now say, we don't want any more migrants, you know, even though they're a nation of migrants, really. How do you change how people feel?
Right. I mean, and this is one of the hard nuts to crack around politics, around any issue, that the way people feel may not match the kind of facts. And that itself is a fact that needs to be addressed. I think we need to have a different kind of discussion. Right now, all of the political framing is about migrants as a threat. There's a lot of political theater here of politicians going to the border, showing the weakness, showing that they're going to help defend the country. I think we can have a different kind of discussion, but we need it from the top down. We need leaders to say, look, we are part of the region. We need leaders to say, this is going to be beneficial. We need different kinds of stories. Some of my colleagues are trying to tell those stories. I know some of your colleagues in the media are trying to tell those stories. And I think that change will come slowly, but it's going to be difficult. We're in economic hardship. Inequality is hard. Violence is up. These things create fear, and outsiders are always an object of that fear. But I think we do need people in the country to have that discussion. It doesn't mean we open the borders to everyone. It doesn't mean that the markets are open to everybody. But I think we do need to have a fact-based discussion, and hopefully, over time, we can change that narrative.
Professor Loren Landau, thank you. A research professor at Wits University, a professor of migration and development at Oxford University in the UK. Really do appreciate the time.